morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar, where we're going to be speaking about tax planning and global residence with a focus on Latin American programs. My name is Michel Soler. I'm a managing director for Henley & Partners. And, in this webinar, we're going to be joined as well by my colleague, Peter Ferrigno. He is our director of tax services. Hi, Peter. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Michelle. Nice to see everybody. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. So I'll come back to you in a second. I'm just going to be reviewing with the audience, what is this webinar all about? Very quickly, an introduction to Henley & Partners for those who may not know us, and just an update on who we are. Current wealth migration trends. We're going to be speaking about, very interesting elements about wealth migration of high net worth individuals throughout the world. A focus on Latin America, and of course, and what do we see when it comes to trends for Latin American private wealth migration. Then we're going to have more in-depth information about residence programs in Latin America. We're going to have 3 residence by investment programs, Costa Rica, Panama, and Uruguay. And then we're going to go further into the taxation elements that, Peter, you are the expert in this field. And we're going to be ending our webinar with some questions and answers. So as a reminder to everyone, on the bottom of your screens, you should be looking at 2 questions and answers. Feel free to drop your questions throughout the webinar, and we'll try to go through those at the end of the session. Okay. So once again, your speakers today. So that's me making this very quick presentation, and shortly Peter is going to be taking over. Director of Tax Services. He's based in Europe, often in London, Spain, and throughout the different wealth centers for Henley & Partners, and visiting our colleagues as well in our offices around the world. I am based in Miami. I'm the managing director for Latin America. So we're more than available, and eventually we'll show this slide at the end as well if you want to reach out. So Henley & Partners, as you know, we are the global leaders in residence and citizenship by investment, pioneers in the investment migration field. We have more than 60 offices around the world, and we have been leading the industry for more than 25 years of experience, more than 25,000 clients advised, families, and their advisors on residence and citizenship by investment, and how to integrate these into the wealth planning model, whether you want to acquire an alternative residence or citizenship as a plan B option as part of your diversification strategy, or simply because you want to have another possibility to live and reside in another country that you may be interested. So we're here to help you. Not only we advise private individuals and their advisors, but we also advise governments around the world. We have a very solid government advisory practice in which we help governments around the world structure, design, and market residence and citizenship by investment programs to help them raise foreign direct investment into their economies to have an impact in their societies and economies. And because of this expertise, that's why we also have this private client service practice, where we help high net worth individuals, families to get alternative residence and citizenship. That's our core, that we help private individuals. But we also have different other services when it comes to advising our clients, whether they want to buy real estate in another country. So we have a dedicated team that supports on the real estate acquisition. But not only real estate, it's an important component when we deal with cross-border elements. We also have people that may be thinking about getting another residence or citizenship because of an education possibility for their children. So we have also very in-house team that helps our clients place and maybe advise their kids that are going to high schools, universities around the world to choose what are the best jurisdictions for these education opportunities that may be present for them in other countries. And of course, we have a concierge team that can help you in those travel and lifestyle services that you may need. So feel free to reach out on any of these services as well. So Peter, without further ado, I will eventually hand over to you as well.
Okay, well, thank you, Michelle. I think we are truly a global company. We've got 60 offices around the world, and we've got more nationalities than that amongst our team. So we really are, where you need us, helping you with all of these kind of issues. So what I want to do is just sort of take you through initially the current trends of people moving around the world, where they're moving to and why, and then talk about the tax issues, and then we'll come back to Latin America and why that's our focus for today's webinar. It's commonly known that more and more wealthy people are moving around than ever before. The world is in a state of uncertainty and has been for about the last 5 years. Things that we never thought would happen are happening, and a lot of people are thinking, a lot of people are saying, well, I need to have a second plan, I need to have an option, so that if I don't like the direction my country's going in, I can either stay and try and change things, or I've got somewhere to go where they have to accept me. And I think we saw that, you see, in 2020 and 2021, when nobody was able to go beyond their garden gate for 6 or 12 months or longer, then people were like, well, actually, if I'm stuck here, what are my plans? What are my options? And there'd been a steady trend in the previous 5 or 6 years of more and more millionaires looking to relocate. And as soon as that option was open again, people have been starting to do so. Last year was a record. This year is already looking like it's going to be a record, and the following year is going to be a record again. We've seen political changes in much of the Americas. We've seen the UK post-Brexit making it much more difficult for UK nationals to go abroad. And so a lot of our work, you'd never have thought 5 or 6 years ago that two of our largest countries for the source of people looking for alternative residency and citizenship would be from the UK or the US, two countries which have very strong passports, traditionally welcome around the world, and now the biggest sources of inquiries for us. And that's clearly a massive change. And where are they going to? I mean, there are countries that millionaires like, countries that are popular with millionaires. And again, places like the UAE have always been welcoming. The US is still very welcoming for millionaires and people that want to develop there. India and China still have a very large proportion of wealthy population of their own. I mean, Macedonia at the top there is an unusual one, or Montenegro is rather one where we weren't expecting a lot of people to go there, but just percentage-wise, they introduced a residency program a few years back, and you get a lot of a very attractive Mediterranean lifestyle on the passport, and it certainly attracted enough millionaires, and they closed that one for the time being, but I know they're looking at doing that again. So we've got Malta traditionally is popular as well, a very open international country, high millionaire population. But look at the bottom half of that list, top 10 encouraging markets. You see both Costa Rica and Panama, and both of those 7,000 or 8,000 millionaires there. Percentage of the population, that's very high. So that's why they're so popular, and that's why this is what we're talking about today. And so we look at millionaires growth. Latin America, you do see countries like Colombia and Brazil and Argentina where millionaires do leave, where people are worried about security or stability or political changes. And there are alternatives there, so they don't have to go so far away. And really, that's what we want to talk about today, is where do you go if that's your part of the world that you want to operate in, and what are the options available to you. But first, let me take a little digression into looking at tax systems, because residency and tax residency are two entirely different concepts. And, it's not, it's quite common that we end up having to explain this on calls, because the right to live in a country is a right and not an obligation. And you aren't necessarily having to pay tax in that country unless you choose to exercise that right and go live there. And so that's when residency becomes tax residency. Typically, that might be if you're spending more than half your time there. So 183 days is 365 divided by 2 and rounded up. But you can also be tax resident. In most countries, if you are there more than 183 days, the assumption would be that you are a resident. That doesn't mean if you're below 183, you're not. It's not symmetrical. If you've got a permanent home or available accommodation, that can also make you a tax resident. Or if you have a center of economic interests in that country, it's where your main base is, whether for your family and your business operations, it's not just the individual. You can be resident in more than one country. In that case, you look to a double tax agreement. There are 3,500 double tax agreements between pairs of countries around the world, and those will resolve if both countries think that you're tax resident. That resolves who gets to decide whether you are or not. And typically that comes back to the qualitative factors of central vital interests, etc., not just the day count. The consequences of that are as follows. Only two countries, with one exception, can tax your income or your assets: the country where the assets are in and the country where you live. So the country where the assets are or where the income is generated is referred to as the country of source. And they get first right to tax the income that generates in that country. Now, they may choose to exercise that. They may, under the double tax agreement, give that up to the country of residence. That does vary country by country. Things like real estate are always taxable in the country where the real estate is located. Interest and dividends and royalties may or may not be, depending on the agreement between the two countries. And if they're not taxable there, they're taxable in the country of residence. The country of residence will tax everything, even the real estate in the other country, but you won't get paid tax twice on it. You will have double taxation relief, which means that the second country will tax it, but will give a credit against its tax liability for any tax that's been paid in the other country. So in the country of residence, you typically, if your worldwide income is being taxed there, you may be paying tax at a higher rate. So there may be a top-up required, but you're not going to be paying tax all over again. The US is an exception there. The US will tax its green card holders and citizens on a citizenship basis. So country of residence tax is first. So country source tax is first, country of residence tax is second. And if you've got the right US bit of paper, then the US will come along and sweep up anything that hasn't been taxed afterwards as well. But different types of countries, different types of citizenship. I talked about residence there. Countries with a residence-based taxation system will tax you on your worldwide income, and the US adds citizenship to that. I would add Eritrea will also taxes on citizenship, but it does have a slightly different way that non-resident citizens are taxed. And frankly, we don't see a lot of people from Eritrea, so I won't worry about that too much. Now, beyond that, you get certain countries that have structured their tax systems in different ways, often smaller or growing countries targeting investment. And so if you look at the great trading hubs of Singapore and Hong Kong, and to a lesser extent, Panama and Costa Rica, they want you to be based there if you're trading internationally. So they'll only tax income that's earned in that country. You won't be taxed on your worldwide income if you're resident there. And we call that a territorial tax system. Similar to that, places like Malta and Cyprus will tax what's earned in that country. They may also look at what's brought into that country and remitted to that country. They have what we call a remittance basis system. So those are two variations that similarly overlap. Equally, some places have no income tax at all. UAE, because they have oil revenue, Monaco, Bahamas, and they will often make their state revenues from other sources. But for individuals choosing to live there, there is no income tax, and that can make them quite attractive. Other places have said, well, we'll just charge a lump sum flat tax. So typically residency type systems in Europe, such as Switzerland, Italy, or Greece, which say, well, if you are a foreign national choosing to base yourself there for the first 10 or 15 years, they might be happy with 100,000 euros in terms of Greece, or 200,000 euros for Italy, or 250,000 and upwards Swiss francs for Switzerland, depending on which canton in Switzerland that you're based in. And those will then pay a lump sum only, a flat tax, which is very different. So if we look at the countries, I got a little question here about Costa Rica. I'll come back to that afterwards, if I may, and I'll hand you to Michelle. We'll take you through the different ways you can get to be a resident of Panama or Costa Rica, or indeed another one which we haven't mentioned there is Uruguay, which has got a very unique tax system. Actually, you can only be unique if it's one of a kind. Uruguay has a unique tax system, but we'll take them in alphabetical order so you can see that at the end. Michelle, let's talk about countries. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very interesting about those differences between the different taxation systems, and certainly this is a driver why people are moving these days, right? So a lot of people that come to Henley & Partners, they have different reasons why they're getting another residence or citizenship, but one of those drivers may be or can be taxation. They want to go into a jurisdiction that could be tax-friendly for them to establish residence, and then eventually take advantage of that jurisdiction system. And before going into that country, they explore, how can I actually get residence or citizenship? So in this map, It's an updated world map of the leading residence and citizenship programs that Henley and Partners can assist. As you can see, we are able and have the capability to help you in many countries around the world, in the Americas and Caribbean, Europe, Asia, Africa. So there's an option for everyone depending on the reasons why you're looking into these programs. Specifically in Latin America, we are able to assist as of today in 3 different countries. So that will be Costa Rica, Panama, and Uruguay. We're going to be starting with Costa Rica. So just as a disclaimer, we are putting them on alphabetical order, but also from north to south. So we're going to start with Costa Rica, no preference when it comes to these programs at all. So as you know, Costa Rica, Central American country, a population of 5.2 million people, relatively small when it comes to population, but a big country when it comes to the opportunities and advantages that it offers to global investors. Main language, Spanish, which is my native language as well, but English is wide spoken throughout the country. And of course, this is a country that it's driven by services and tourism. There's a lot of people that visit more and more often this country because of its attractiveness when it comes to diversity, biodiversity. A lot of people like the relaxed lifestyle. So we'll go very into the details of how you can actually get residence in Costa Rica. On our Henley Passport Index, those who eventually live in Costa Rica and are pursuing a second passport, it's a very good passport overall. Rank it's within the top 30, and it allows people to get into 150 destinations plus, visa-free or visa on arrival. Now, remembering that this is a residence program, there's no citizenship by investment in Costa Rica. So people will need to get residence first, and then if they are pursuing citizenship, there's a path to do so through naturalization by residence, but that will require you to live in the country, and that will be full-time as well. So why is Costa Rica an attractive jurisdiction? Of course, it has a business-friendly environment. Politically and economically speaking, it's also very stable, which provides a lot of peace of mind for people that they want to go live there. And it has a favorable tax regime for global investors that eventually become residents of Costa Rica. It's a very family-oriented program as well. Core family, spouse, minor children are able to be included in an application. And if we have children above the age of 18, that it's still possible as long as they are financially dependent on the main applicant and the spouse until the age of 25. After the age of 25, they will need to make their own separate applications, remembering that most countries will look adult applicants as potential investors, but they're flexible when it comes to adult children, subject that they fulfill certain specific requirements, most likely dependency on the main applicant, financial dependency, and some other requirements depending on the jurisdiction that we're talking about. Now, there is a path to citizenship for those that eventually would like to get Costa Rica passport. That will come after at least 5 years of residence for nationals that have either a Central American or Ibero-American Spanish-speaking countries, most likely. And for all the other nationalities, that will be a period of 7 years after being living, full-time in Costa Rica. So there is more than 183 plus days per year if you eventually are pursuing that goal. But if not, the residency requirement, it's very low physical presence to maintain the residence permit. Now, how can I actually get a residence permit in Costa Rica? And this is where we get into the residence by investment program, but there are actually other categories that they don't necessarily require an investment, but it's most likely about the income or, if we are retirees, pensions receive. So this is a very flexible possibility. Most Latin American countries, they actually function this way, whether you have the financial capacity to live in the country or you receive passive income, you have a pension. Most Latin American countries are very open to receive these global investors. In the case of the residence by investment program in Costa Rica, the minimum investment is 150,000 US dollars, and it could be in different investment routes. Most likely, most applicants apply to the real estate, which is the most popular route when it comes to residence by investment in Costa Rica. It's a very interesting dynamic market. There's a lot of luxury real estate, lifestyle acquisitions that people are actually getting properties in Costa Rica. Well, if you invest at least 150,000 US into a Costa Rica property, you are able to apply for a residence permit through investment. There are other possibilities, whether you invest in Costa Rica companies or if you invest in the local Costa Rican market, stock market, that will be another possibility through financial securities. Now, for those that are not necessarily looking to invest right away into any of the three investment routes that I spoke, there are other possibilities to get that residence permit. Another category will be the fixed income residence permit. And here you need to have an income of at least 2,500 US dollars received from abroad or in Costa Rica. And that will be the basis that you can actually get a residence permit. What are people doing in practice is they're opening a bank account in Costa Rica, putting 60,000 US dollars into a bank account that generates 24 deposits of 2,500 US dollars. And that allows to create this passive income into the economy, okay? Or if you have passive income from rentals or dividends or any other passive income sources, that could be another possibility to demonstrate to a local accountant or notary that this income is derived from passive sources, and then eventually that could be the basis to get an application into a residence permit as well. Lastly, and this is for people that are retired and they receive a pension from abroad, this needs to be a lifetime pension of at least 1,000 US dollars. We could also construct an application based on this specific requirement, which could be very attractive to a lot of people. They don't need to make an investment. You have sufficient funds to eventually live in the country, and notably, you meet the requirement of a lifetime pension of at least 1,000 US. That could be something very attractive and very powerful to get a residence permit. Now, what is the process to eventually get a residence permit in Costa Rica? Of course, we're here to assist you. Get in touch with us. We'll run the initial due diligence checks, and then eventually we'll get agreement signed, retainer paid, and we can start constructing the application until we are able for you to travel to Costa Rica, file the application. And an interesting element about the Costa Rica residence permit is that at submission, you could already reside in Costa Rica waiting your approval if you need to eventually reside there. If not, you can go back to your country of origin. It's taking about 12 months these days to get that final approval, but it's a very convenient element for people that they want something that will allow them to reside in the country right away. Well, Costa Rica has that specific feature, and you're able to get an approval at submission, and then eventually the final approval comes about 12 months later. When it comes to physical presence, if we go back just 1 second, Peter, if we talk about physical presence requirement in Costa Rica, it's a very flexible residence permit. We initially get a 2-year residence permit renewable for the same periods. And what the Costa Rica authorities are requiring is that you're not absent more than 12 months per year. So that means that it's a 1-day physical presence requirement. We suggest to say perhaps a little bit more so that you can get to know the country a little bit more. But 1 day per year, that's the minimum physical presence requirement. And then eventually you'll renew your residence permit after the 2nd year to get another 2-year period. And at year number 3, we're able to submit a residence permit application to become permanent resident. So that is very short timeline to get permanent residence in a country with low physical presence requirement. And after the 3-year, then, you become a permanent residence, 1 day per year. And that is something that you can liquidate your investment as well, and no further requirement when it comes to the investment in Costa Rica or later on. So that's a very powerful element on the Costa Rica program. Now, let's go to Panama, which is next to Costa Rica, and of course, a very attractive jurisdiction, very popular. Over the years, it has even become more popular. No wonder why both Costa Rica and Panama, they now are part of those jurisdictions on the top 10 of growing jurisdictions arriving more high net worth individuals. So Panama specifically, a very developed jurisdiction as well, a very strong and solid residence by investment program. Their main language is Spanish, population 4.4 million people. And it's also an economy that is service-based, but here we can find a very developed financial hub center, logistics center. When it comes to state wealth planning, Panama, it's very outstanding in Latin America. And certainly that is one of the elements why people are choosing Panama as their hub, where they can get residence and eventually they can also pursue a path to citizenship with a very solid, strong passport in top 30, more than 140 destinations visa-free or visa on arrival with a Panama passport. Next slide. So what are the key benefits of getting the residence permit in Panama? Of course, you are in a jurisdiction that is the hub of the Americas, as they call it. It's strategically located in Central America, but very well connected to the rest of the world, not only North America, South America, but also Europe. So Panama is one of those places that is super well connected. Its airports are flying everywhere, so easily for those people that are looking to eventually get to Panama for business, for leisure, this is the jurisdiction that you want to get a residence permit. It is also very family oriented when it comes to which are the dependents that we can, include in our application. So that will be, spouse, minor children, but a particularity is that we can also include parents of any age. So that is something that many people may find attractive to include your parents in an application, and then eventually a very solid and very attractive healthcare system as well when it comes to private healthcare. Panama is quite advanced from that regard. Now, the proximity that it has to strategic jurisdictions like the US, Canada, Colombia for business as well. A lot of people doing business in other parts of Latin America like Ecuador, Peru. In Panama, it's a very attractive jurisdictions to be based and eventually conduct business through the region. Now, path to citizenship, we can just mention that there is a path for those that get permanent residence in Panama. That will be after 5 years of residence. And in certain cases, we may be able to have a shortened period of time, depending on your nationality. Most likely countries like Spain, for example, they benefit a reduction of the time when it comes to the eligibility to apply for citizenship. Now, Panama also offers a lot of different routes to get residence in Panama. The most attractive option as of today is a qualified investor route, which is the residence by investment proposition that Panama recently, a few years ago, they have modified the conditions to make it more attractive. They have confirmed the investment thresholds also quite recently to continue what they are having at the moment. So that will be 3 different routes, 300,000 US in real estate, which is a super attractive, dynamic real estate market. With a minimum investment of 300,000 US, you can get permanent residence directly through the qualified investor program. It doesn't have to be in real estate. It could also be either 500,000 US, $500,000 US into the Panama Stock Exchange market, financial securities. And if you don't want to invest in the real estate market, but rather have a fixed term deposit in a Panama financial institution, that could also be the basis to apply through the qualified investor. Very attractive proposition, very fast processing for those that want to do everything remotely, and then eventually travel to Panama about a month later after we submit the application to finalize the procedure. This is probably the most attractive option as of today in Panama through investment with a minimum of 300,000 in the real estate market. Now, there are other options available for Panama. Here we have a category called the friendly nations. There's a few countries that qualify for this. Not every nationality qualifies for the friendly nations possibility, but countries like Canadians, US, European nationals, certain other Latin American citizenships do qualify for the friendly nations. And here we have a different route that goes rather than going directly to permanent residence, we get a temporary residence permit for 2 years, and with a lower investment threshold, 200,000 US in real estate or 200,000 in a fixed term deposit. That could also be the possibility to get a residence permit, temporary first, but at year number 2, we're able to renew that residence permit to permanent residence. Now, a last category that I'm going to mention very briefly is the forestry investor route with 100,000 US minimum into a forestry reforestation peak project. You will get a residence permit for 2 years that could eventually lead to permanent residence in the future. Or if you invest a little bit more, 350,000, you could also go into permanent residence directly. Now, just to mention once again, these are some of the leading routes that can get your residence permit in Panama, but there are many other routes. We also have a retirement pensionado visa that is available for people that have a lifetime pension as well, with a low investment threshold here. Now, the process is very similar. Get in touch with Henny & Partners that eventually will assess and assist in the application to the approval, depending on the route that you choose. We'll file everything before the authorities and help you get that process until you have your residence permit in hand. Next slide. So the benefits, as I mentioned, very attractive proposition, low investment threshold, relatively well-connected jurisdiction that will give us, an attractive residence permit. Now let's go to the last residence by investment program. Well, here is a residence program, really. We're going to Uruguay, a jurisdiction that many people haven't considered in the past. It's relatively less known compared to the other jurisdiction, but it's becoming more popular over the years. Certainly a very attractive country in South America, part of the Mercosur alliance here in Latin America. But what I like about this program is that it's not necessarily based on an investment. Uruguay has a residence based on the intention to reside in Uruguay, and of course the financial capacity that an applicant has. So a very attractive jurisdiction, very politically and economically stable, growing its economy, and it's also one of those geographical habits for a lot of people in South America, close to Brazil, close to Argentina. So it definitely offers quality of life, a peaceful environment. Uruguay, it's known to be very neutral when it comes to geopolitics. So we don't have, radical political movements in Uruguay. So a very, very stable economy. It has an interesting real estate market that is becoming more popular for global investors. It has already been popular for Brazilians and Argentinians that are, of course, very close geographically speaking. But the real estate market, it's also a very attractive proposition here when it comes to luxury real estate. It could also be farm. So it's still an open real estate market for global investors. Now, an element that eventually will go back to Peter is this jurisdiction offers an attractive tax holiday, which is an incentive for a lot of people to start looking and keeping Uruguay in its radar. Okay, so we'll come back into those technicalities of this tax holiday, but it's a very important driver why people are choosing to get residence in Uruguay, and eventually that opens the door to qualify for a tax holiday if that is something that you're looking for. A convenient application process, flexible when it comes to physical presence requirements. So this is not a country that requires you to, live there full time to keep your residence. There is an intention to reside, and of course, you are supposed to live in the country as much as you want, but this is a country that grants residence based on the intention to reside and the ties that you eventually construct with the country. Now, it's attractive because it offers also the possibility, depending on your nationality. So people that come from a Mercosur country, Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, the conditions are very straightforward and it's very facilitated because of the integration that these countries have. For those that are not part of the Mercosur, which is most nationalities, Of course, you need to demonstrate that you have financial capacity, in this case, monthly income of at least 1,000 US, that you can demonstrate that you can generate either through employment or an entrepreneur activity in your way. But it could also be through a pension, retirement, passive income coming from abroad. We will need to demonstrate the authorities that you have at least that financial capacity and passive income of at least 1,000 US dollars that you can receive in your way eventually. Now, it is important that you need to have your vaccines in place. This is a requirement for the country. And then eventually you'll need to demonstrate no criminal records like any other country, and the intention that you will be residing in your way. The real estate market, as I mentioned, there's no requirement to buy real estate to get a residence permit in your way. However, it does generates ties with the countries, and this intention to reside gets reinforced for those that eventually get a property in your way. And even if you want to get a residence permit, for the rest of the family, this could be an interesting proposition as well. Now, for the process, the same. Get in touch with us. Our client advisors will be able to assist when it comes to exploring what is the most suitable option. And if your way it is the option for you, we will definitely assist you and prepare the application until you are traveling to your way for biometrics, submit the application before the authorities, and then we will follow up until you have your residence permit in hand. Now, just a very brief summary of the key benefits of this residence permit. It allows you to live, work, and study in the country. The eligibility for citizenship comes after 3 or 5 years. 3 years will be for nationals that are married, and 5 years will be for nationals that are single. So that is one of the requirements. If you do pursue citizenship, you do need to live in your way. So this is not a back pocket residence permit that you can get residence and then eventually come 3 years later and get citizenship. That is not the spirit in the your way citizenship path. You do need to live in the country for at least 3 or 5 years, depending on your marital situation. But then you will need to live at least more than 183 plus days in the country if you're pursuing citizenship in that regards. Now let's go back to you, Peter. So maybe you can run a quick tax summary, and if you want to expand on your way, that is fantastic as well.
Okay, well, thank you, Michelle. That's very helpful. When I was editing the slides, I have a very nice picture of Uruguay, which the opening slide for that seemed to have got edited out. So apologies for that, because it was a particularly pretty country. Yes, so tax systems, as we've spoken already, Panama and Costa Rica already have a territorial tax system. Uruguay has this tax holiday, which is actually the year of arrival plus the following 10 years, which is why one slide said 11 and this one says 10, because it's the year of arrival plus the following 10. And what that means effectively is all foreign income is covered by the tax holiday. So it's a territorial tax system in practice, even if it's not described as one that way. Now, Costa Rica and Panama have a simple 183-day requirement to become tax resident. Uruguay has a lot more criteria there. So that 183 days will be enough, or having your permanent home there and you declare, well, it's my permanent home. But also if your base of economic interest is there, you can then become a tax resident. And you can also demonstrate that it's your base of economic interest by either investing in real estate or a company that's creating jobs. Uruguay has this unique way of expressing its limits in what they call indexed units, which aren't Uruguayan pesos, but are a way of dealing with the inflation so they don't have to keep changing it. And so I put it in US dollars there just to make it clear for everybody. It's in index units, which converts to pesos, which converts to dollars. But at the end of the day, for comparability, let's just keep it simple. And if you have invested enough, whether it's $500,000 in real estate and you're spending 60 days there, or if you're spending 2.4 million in real estate or a company creating jobs, Uruguay considers that for their purposes, your center of economic interest is in Uruguay. So therefore, they will treat you as a tax resident, regardless of how much time you spend there if you've invested enough, or at least if you spend 60 days with a real estate investment. Now, Why this is important is because if you travel frequently or a lot, or if you are a genuine nomad, it might be very difficult to demonstrate to any country that you're tax resident. So when you look doing things like opening bank accounts or having investment income in, from fund managers in various countries, they will want to know where you are a tax resident of. So being able to become a tax resident in Uruguay with a lower physical presence requirement does actually help, and it doesn't create huge tax liability because the worldwide income is covered by the tax holiday. So it is unique in this respect of giving you tax residence without a significant physical presence requirement. And that's where it becomes very attractive for people that have complex structures and holdings, because it does mean that you've got the ability to get a tax residency certificate. Now, the downside of it is Uruguay only has 23 double taxation agreements. And some countries will question if you become tax resident somewhere if you can't get a residency certificate under a double tax agreement. But in the right facts and circumstances, it's very important. And when I speak to the Ministry of Tax there, they are negotiating as many double tax agreements as they can, but with a very small team, there's a limit to how many they can add. But they are aware that this is one of their priorities. And so they are looking to add to the double tax agreements network as quickly as they possibly can. But at the moment, it's territorial in all but name and has this additional simplification process. So what does this mean particularly for US citizens? I mean, the US, as we said at the beginning, does tax on citizenship with worldwide income. So going to one of these three countries won't automatically give you a tax saving, quite the opposite. What it will do, though, because of the way the tax system is structured, you're likely to have a much lower tax base there than you would have in the US. And the top rate of tax in Panama or Costa Rica is only 25%. Uruguay, it's slightly higher, but even allowing for that, if only a small part of your income is being taxed, most of that will be creditable against the US tax liability. So for US nationals, as long as it doesn't create any more tax, you won't necessarily have a saving. As long as it doesn't create an additional tax bill, all of these countries are effectively equally as attractive. Now, as Michelle already said, if you do actually move there, you do start the clock on becoming a citizen. And depending whether you're a Latin American citizen or a Spanish citizen or one of the rest of the world, it might take 3 to 5 to 7 years. But once you have done that and become a citizen of that country, then, of course, the possibility of revoking US citizenship comes up if that was your only citizenship. This is a complex area, should only be done with considerable advice and assistance, but it is a possibility that these things do open up to people longer term. Questions and answers. So there were 2 questions in the question box. Let me come back to those. First one says from anonymous attendee, Costa Rica is territorial, but there's a CCSS. That's a social security contribution. And in the limited research I was able to do while Michelle was talking, seems to me that applies for employees and employment income. And if you are working in Panama, or even if you're employed from abroad, then you would only pay on that. It's about 12% and change. I didn't see initially that it does apply to retirement income, but it is a possibility. It's only there on that. So I don't think that's a reason that they wouldn't immigrate to Costa Rica. The trouble with social security contributions is they're not creditable under a double tax agreement. But certainly, if you're employed there, regardless of where you be employed, if you're working somewhere in the world, you always have a social security contribution anyway, and it's broadly comparable to what you would have paid in the US were you on a US contract. So in practice, I've not seen it come up as being a constraint. Sounds like you've heard differently, but that's the beauty of these calls, is I learn about this too. So yes, so it's not on everything, it is just employment income from what I see. But pensions and retirement income, of course, if you've got extensive investment income that's not in a formal pension, that wouldn't seem to be covered anyway. So there's a place for it, but we need to be aware of that, and the modelling of that would be important if that's significant to you. OECD monitoring and the common reporting standards for residence development. Yeah, Panama has had some sort of questions recently about tax transparency. It's currently a high-risk country. It wasn't for a while. It's gone back to that, and I know they're looking to remove that down again. I think these are the things that you always need to be careful of. And I think if you've not become a tax resident in the country, as I can say, the issue is always telling the other country whether you're a tax resident or not. And that's why, yeah, Panama has had a history, which they've made extensive efforts to clean up. But that's why Costa Rica and Uruguay are more focused to a lot of people now, because they want to have that clarity to everybody else that that they are addressing tax transparency issues. To get citizenship, how many days do you have to stay in Costa Rica? You can only start the citizenship clock when you're actually resident there. I think Michelle told
more than 183 days per year if you effectively intend to become a citizen in Costa Rica, and that will take 7 years since the moment that you become a resident. So it is a country that you do need to live in the country extensively, and more than half of the year that you will need to do that every single year for 7 years.
Okay. Question also about Argentina. Argentina is not on here at the moment because there's no formal plan. There's no formal program that we are actively involved in marketing. I do know that they are interested, and they are, with their aim to attract more foreign investment. I would be very surprised if they weren't looking at something like this. But that would be, stay tuned. Maybe when we do another one next year, we might be able to talk about Argentina, or maybe not, or certainly other countries in the region. It's not only, I think, these three. This isn't the end game. I think once the other countries see the investment that's coming, they will also be interested in that as well. Okay, well, Anonymous has said that these consulted Costa Rica lawyers, and the base does include pensions, but not sure if that includes US pensions. So there's a limit to the depth we can go into on these. Thanks for letting me know that. And if we want to pick that conversation up offline, then, but if you've already spoken to lawyers in Costa Rica, then my knowledge can only go so far when it covers so many countries. Panama has been removed from the EU's high-risk list, well, that's nice to know. Thank you very much for letting us know that, the person that did. So those are the questions that we've had so far. And appreciate all of those. So all that really is left for us to do is to thank you all for attending. Stay tuned to find out the other webinars we will be doing at about various different locations in the world. But yeah, it was good to have you all here. Thank you for some great questions. I just hand it back to Michelle for you to close off.
Thank you so much, Peter, and appreciate the attendance for everyone. So yes, definitely stay tuned. As of now, we're able to assist in 3 different countries in Latin America. Feel free to reach out. We'll be more than happy to assist in exploring the available options, understand your particular situation and what are the drivers behind this. So that is the most important for us, so that we can assist you into the appropriate jurisdiction. So once again, thank you everyone for attending. Stay tuned for more webinars, and definitely, hopefully, we'll be able to assist in more Latin American jurisdictions in the near future. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Yeah.